welcome to another great edition of Mississippi Stories. I'm your host, Marshall Ramsey, editor-at-large and editorial cartoonist for Mississippi Today. And I tell you what, I'm really excited about today's episode because I've heard this guy speak. I've gotten to know him a little bit, and it's almost like we cross paths. When I left Georgia to come to Mississippi, he left Mississippi to go to Georgia. So we literally canceled each other out on the census, but he is absolutely a brilliant magician. I'm going to just kind of go from the notes here. He is an American corporate magician. I like that. Mentalist and frequent keynote speaker at conferences and other meetings. Of course, like I mentioned, he is a native Mississippian. He was born in Jackson, grew up in Brandon, moved across the Pearl River and grew up in Brandon, and then went to Mississippi State, where really did a lot of really cool and interesting things. And one of the things I like about Joe Turner is that Joe's life literally has led him up to this moment. Well, we're in this moment of great transition, and it just seems like everything he's ever done will lead us to some real good wisdom today. So Joe, it's good to see you and welcome to the show.
Marshall, thanks for having me today.
Man, it's really good to see you. Like I said, we belong to a speaking group together, and so I get to see you there. You usually drive over from Atlanta, get to do that Highway 20 ride, as Zach Brown likes to sing about. And I don't know about you, but I'm just darn glad that Alabama has finally managed to get everything finished on the road construction part.
Oh my gosh, it's always an adventure. But I mean, I've lived in Atlanta since 1993 or near Atlanta. And you know, as soon as something finishes, something else will start. So
that is true. That is true. Yeah, we left Atlanta in '93. That's why I've joked that we kind of canceled each other out. And I always said that Alabama is Cherokee for road construction because it seems like they've been going for years. But today we're meeting via Zoom. As you like to call it, an opportunity to expand the lane, not to pivot, which I thought was a brilliant way of putting it. But, you know, obviously, I think we probably need to start in the very beginning. You were born in Jackson around 1969, just to throw your age out there. You look much younger than I do, although we're about the same vintage. But your folks moved across the river to Brandon, and that's where you grew up. Talk a little bit about what it was like growing up in the 70s and the 80s in Brandon, Mississippi.
Well, I mean, obviously, I first remember Jackson. I lived in Northeast Jackson. I went to Green Elementary School in the mid 70s, and so it set me on the right path. I mean, I went to Green, and I had this woman named Mary Bass as my first grade teacher, and I really wonder what my life would have been like without her. Sometimes between her influence and encouragement and that of my parents and my grandparents. I mean, it was a miracle that I was in the right place at the right time. Dad got a job in Rankin County, and so we moved in '79 after the flood over to Brandon. And again, it was just right place, right time. The teachers that I had in middle school and high school, I look back and I can't believe how fortunate I was to grow up in, small town America, God and Sweet Tea and Mary Ann Mobley. and that's, those are things we value in Brandon. I guess between the way the community was sometimes in each other's business. I mean, small town Mississippi, small town America, people know things, but if something happened at school, then Dad was going to hear about it and Mom was going to hear about it, and they were going to take the teacher's side and the principal's side and not my side on things. And just between that level of sort of loving sets of boundaries and expectations, I was set on a good path. I look back and I can't believe how lucky I was.
I think about that, and you kind of trigger something. My first grade teacher was Miss Floyd, and she was actually from Mississippi. I always thought that was kind of cool. And I remember my third grade teacher, Miss Kaler, realized I could draw really early on, and she really encouraged me at age 8 to do what I do. What were some of the things that you were truly interested in when you were in elementary school? I mean, obviously you are, and a lot of people they may not know this about you, or they will here in a minute, but you're just an amazing pianist on top of being just an incredible magician. You've got a great skill set in there. What were some of the early talents that started to shine with you?
Well, Mrs. Bass noticed that I could read well above my age range, and she pulled me and a couple of other little boys and a couple of little girls who were really kind of tracking a little ahead of things, and put us to the side and gave us more advanced academic challenges.
Yeah.
And this is before there was really such a thing as a formal gifted program in that area. That didn't even start, I think, until the next year is when they first started some specific programs for gifted students. But that was an early talent. And that's largely to the credit of my mom's mom, my grandmother, Mama, who taught sophomore English for 30 years in Jones County. And I was just raised to read, and I remember Mama talking about just elocution and diction and speak up and all of those things. And just the expectation was that you would be able to read and write and communicate well if you were going to be in the Carter and the Turner families. That's just kind of what you were expected to be able to do. It's a minimum requirement. Music came early. There was an old upright piano in our house. When we moved to Brandon, we had, and even in Jackson, we had that old piano. When we moved to Brandon, we got a nicer piano. But it all stemmed from my mom grew up in Ellisville. And so when we would visit there, my mama and papa, they had this piano. And there's pictures of me just as a very little boy, toddler, sitting and banging, of course, to start with, but then learning to pick out things. And Mama would show me some stuff, and we would have the hymnal. And I started reading some self-teaching piano books when I was, 5 and 6 and 7, and just trying to teach myself the basics. And so music, I think, showed up pretty quickly as something that I had some skill for, some knack for, and that has saved me thousands of dollars in therapy over the course of the decades, because I have taken many frustrations out on Mama's piano, which is now in that room over next to my office,
Yeah.
Which I have inherited. And it is, I play every day. If there's a piano within reach, if I'm at home, I play every day. If I'm traveling, but the hotel has a piano somewhere, I'll probably find my way to it. Don't leave a piano unguarded.
You're the cool guy in the lobby who's down there playing.
Well, I try not to be the obtrusive guy in the lobby, but I love it. It is therapeutic. It's part of how I express myself. I've written a good bit of music, and mostly musical theater. I have a real later on, sort of the acting and the performing on stage piece came even in first grade. I remember our Christmas program, and Miss Bass, I can still see it in my head. Miss Bass gave me a line to introduce a song that all of these, 5 and 6-year-olds are singing. And I remember the microphone and the stand that it was on, and we were in this sort of cafetorium thing that we were in. And I remember walking to that microphone, and as a 5-year-old, I just going, sort of catching my breath. And it was funny because, this kid is scared. But I remember that moment. That was my first time behind a microphone in front of an audience. And so I started, I was a little show off. Growing up, if you learn a few tricks and you sing a few songs and you learn the motions for all the Bible school songs and all of the stuff, it's a good time. And I've never been one to shy away from participating in a show.
I'm just sitting there smiling because I'm thinking about me as a little kid drawing pictures and handing them out to everybody. It's the same thing. It's like I found something I love to do, but I also realized that people would pat me on the head and say, "Good job on that too." So it
There's
was kind of
affirmation.
because
Yeah.
I kind of wondered where your performing started from because you're such a unique combination of left brain, right brain. I mean, you literally went to Mississippi State and studied physics. I mean,
I love physics.
that's not normally a right brain kind of thing generally. I mean, I took physics in high school, that kind of thing. But when you were in high school, did you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to put the performing on the sideline. I want to go into physics, or did you somehow see that you were going to be able to meld all these together?
I wish I could claim there was a master plan. I've in my 50s, looking back, I have been fortunate that a guiding principle for me has always been to try to um, integrate whatever new thing came along into what I do. But I can't say that in high school I saw in advance that I would wind all of these threads together. I loved performing. I was in the
Mhm.
marching band in high school, and I loved all of that. But I just really had a passion for physics and astronomy. And if you think about the 80s is the time when the Voyager probes were
Yeah.
going past Jupiter and Saturn and all the outer planets, and all of those pictures would come back. And I was just so enamored with astronomy. And I got a telescope when I was 10 and begged my dad to get me a really great one when I was older. But I remember that first beat up old telescope, you know, 20 bucks at a garage sale or something. And it didn't even have a tripod. The tripod was missing a leg. And my step grandfather was a good woodworker, and he built an extra leg for the tripod so that I could. And I remember just seeing the moon for the first time. And then finally, the first time I saw Saturn in that telescope, it was just unbelievable that it was real. And all those pictures that you'd seen from Voyager, and all those things that you'd seen from Skylab in the 70s, and all those things you see on the news, they were actually really there. And so physics spoke to me. And I had such a wonderful physics teacher in high school, Nancy Patrick, that I thought this is what I should pursue. It felt like a really great fit. I got to Mississippi State and was continuing to study first engineering, but then really pure physics. I
Yeah.
love the physics, and especially the astronomy and astrophysics part of it. But theater reeled me in, and I went to see a show, and I saw it was HMS Pinafore, and I saw all these guys in the backs. They're the sailors, and they seemed like they were having the best time. And I just thought, it's been since sixth grade since I was in a play. Next year, I'll try out for that, and whatever comes around, and they'll let me be a tree or something, and that'll be great fun. And I auditioned and ended up. It was Pirates of Penzance, so I ended up with a solo opening the show. I was the secondary pirate lieutenant, and so but I had the opening solo for the big thing, and I was I was done. So the bug bit, and I had to try to figure out, well, I love physics and astronomy, but now this whole music and acting piece is coming in, and I didn't know where it was going. But I just did the best I could to sort of. You ever seen a house that wasn't all built at the same time? It's just the pieces get added on, and at the end it sort of seems like it is supposed to be that way, but as you're putting it on, you don't know where it's going. That's really sort of how my life and career have developed. I will say that one summer I had a fellowship to do nuclear physics research out at Oak Ridge National Lab in Tennessee. I was still a physics major specifically at this point. And so by day I was doing physics research, just, intern levels, undergraduate stuff. But my apartment was across the street from their theater, Oak Ridge Community Theater. And so I went over and they were having auditions. And so I said, well, look at the dates and maybe they'll let me, be in the chorus or something. And I went to audition and they were having an issue. They didn't have a pianist at the audition. And people were showing up with music that they wanted to sing, but there was no one there to play. So I said, well, I can help out. And I ended up assistant music directing that show. And I was doing physics by day and theater by night. And I just realized during the course of that summer that I love physics, but I don't love being a physicist.
Yeah. You thought about even being a physics teacher, didn't you?
Well, that was how I thought I would integrate things.
Yeah.
As my interests broadened, and I was like, well, I love this, but I also like being in front of an audience, and I'm good with words, and I write well, and I'm pretty good on a platform. Maybe I should, what can include all of that? And teaching is pretty much the family business. My mom, my uncle, my grandmother, my great aunts, they're all teachers. And I thought, well, maybe it's destiny that I should be a physics teacher. And that's what my degree is in secondary ed, physics and chemistry. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's good.
No, I said the amazing thing is, in a way, you are a teacher. You just do it in a very entertaining way now.
It came back. These things, I can't explain it, but I thought I would do that, and I got that degree, and I thought I would go do another degree in theater, acting and directing, particularly musical theater. And I wrote a musical that got produced, and so there was some things that I was like, well, yeah, I should at least explore what's going to happen here. And I realized that I have this addiction to food and shelter. And I was watching really, really talented actors and performers just, burn out and flame out. And it's just I'm a pretty good, or even a really good performer, but I'm not a top 1% of 1% of 1% performer. And I don't have that gift. So I thought I would go audition. I would interview for a corporate job, and I was looking for companies that would interview a guy who had this sort of strange background. And this management consulting firm in Atlanta would interview you no matter what your major was. And so I went to interview with them. And that was a disaster. But I mean, it was embarrassing. I ended up going through this interview, the interview at Mississippi State, and they said, yeah, you're a little off our normal track. They were normally looking for the hardcore business people and maybe some engineers, but a very sort of more focused personality than I had. But teaching background inspired some thought about maybe the change management, sort of the training development, as you said, teaching. So I went to do this interview in Atlanta, and I was a half hour late for the interview because I forgot to set my watch ahead, which was embarrassing. So I thought I blew it. I went in 30 minutes late, thought I was 30 minutes early, realized, I said, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Should I just go back to the airport now? And she said, no, it's fine. We'll do your paperwork at lunch, and you're just in time for your first actual interview. So I went through the day, and I guess maybe I thought it was a lost cause at that point anyway. So I was pretty relaxed and just sort of went along with the ride for the rest of the day, even to the point of maybe being a little more, not flippant, but a little more casual and honest in my interaction with the closing interview with the partner that day, and said some things that maybe you wouldn't be coached to say in an interview.
Like what? Like what'd you say?
I walked in, and there he is, and this is early 93. and he's there. And in those days, you had the two-tone shirts, the dress shirts with the different colored collar, and the paisley suspenders, and a lot of teal, and just the early 90s vibe, and moose in what was left of his hair, and tortoiseshell glasses, and he was just right out of the magazine. And I'm just sitting there, and I said, I guess you heard about he was telling me, how's your day, all this. Well, I guess you heard about the snafu at the beginning. No, what? Well, I just said, well, I forgot something I watched, but it all worked out. He said, did you do the paperwork? Yeah. Okay, well, fine. So he didn't care about that. And we're talking about these things. And he said, well, Joe, everything you've ever done, you quit.
Wow.
Why should we hire you?
Wow.
He's looking at my changing majors and the different things. And
Yeah.
I said, well, and so I just told him, I said, look, if you look at what I did, I never actually left anything. I just kept adding things. My interests kept broadening, and I kept finding ways to put the pieces together in a different direction. I didn't quit. I just added to what I was learning. And he liked that answer. And then at the end, this is where I probably overstepped. He said, Joe, just all of this is all well and good, but this theater business and all, you're a little more flamboyant than our usual hires. And I said,
what?
And I said, well, with all due respect, you're the one wearing paisley suspenders.
Nice. Nice. What was his reaction?
He said, good point. It was, so I would never coach someone. I wasn't insulting about it, but I mean, he's telling me I'm flamboyant, and I'm like, I couldn't look less.
Right.
I was wearing off the rack JCPenney, and which is what I still like a lot of the times. But he's there off the magazine cover, and I'm like, oh, I mean, with all due respect, those they were beautiful silk paisley and all of that. But I was like, you're the one wearing paisley braces, and he was, yeah, point taken. So anyway, I got home. I thought it was a lost cause. They called, asked me when I would like to start. And this was March of '93. I said, how about August? Because I had a lot of plans for the summer that I didn't want to give up on. And they said, what day in August?
Wow.
Said, August 30th is a Monday. And they said, we'll see you on August 30th. And that's how I got my job.
Number one, I've learned something already. Don't be afraid to ask, because if you hadn't asked, or if you hadn't have been bold, we wouldn't be talking right now. You would be in a different context. That obviously. The other thing is, and a lot of times when we look backwards in our life, it all makes sense. It's just looking forward. Like you and I are both wondering, looking at our schedule for the day, trying to figure out what we're going to do next, kind of thing. But Roger Parrott, who's the president of Belhaven University, has just written a new book, and I'm having a moment. I'll put it in the copy underneath the title of it, or I'll send you that too. But he talks about, don't plan, listen for God's signs. And I'm just looking at your life so far, and you were talking about adding things to it. You were smart enough to realize, okay, like when you were in Maine doing your theater thing, that, okay, I'm not in the 1%, and I'm not going to beat my head against the wall and do this. I'm going to do something else. And a lot of creative people don't ever they fall in love with what they're doing, and they can't let it go when it's not working. And you've always managed to be able to do that. So at this point, you thought you were going to be a physics teacher, and now you're in Atlanta in the corporate world. When did magic come into play in all this, by the way?
It was a little bit later. Magic was fun when I was 5 and 6. And then when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, I was doing magic enough to do, kids' birthday parties and stuff like that. Wow. But it was not, I mean, it was a cute thing to do in a talent show when I was 12. Yeah. It was not a serious avocation even. I was really studying acting and singing and piano and composition, and then certainly the business side of things, and magic kind of came back excuse me, into my world when I was in church in the mid to late 90s. And I remember being in church and they were sort of, you know how they come in and they sort of shame you because you're not volunteering for the nursery or to help with the kids.
Yeah.
Right? We really need more help. And, you know, and I don't mean that in an ugly way. We have to be reminded sometimes that all the ministries of a church need people to participate, and we go where we're comfortable, but sometimes that leaves certain things undone. So I felt, you know, moved, you know, by Jove, I will volunteer to help with the children. And I went in and oh my gosh, I picked physics teaching as a on purpose, because I'm not really elementary school. I was just, oh my gosh, at the energy and the just sort of intrinsic chaos of this moment. And so I reached in my pocket and there was a coin, a quarter. And so I started doing tricks with the coin, just the magic that I remembered, and it worked. I had attention, and you know, there was a break in the chaos that I was able to use. And I said, well, this is very helpful. And of course, they want to see more. So now they've placed value on it. So I can use it as a bribe or as a motivation, if you want to say it nicely. And so I had this tool to sort of help me manage interactions in that setting. And I thought, well, that's kind of fun. So the next time my mom and dad were coming over from Brandon, I said, you know, that Foot Locker full of old magic junk, bring that with you. And it just started little by little, you know, blow the dust off of this and throw away the parts that, you know, the things that have rotted away, and put together something. I said, this will be fun. I'll do a little show. And I started doing that. And then one thing leads to another. And it's like, oh, my daughter's turning 8. You know, would you like to do her birthday party? Yeah, I would actually. And which that story has a back end that I will tell you later. So we have to come back to that first birthday party for the girl who turned 8. But I started finding, you know, here, well, where's the local magic shop? And oh, there's a club, and oh, there's places to get involved. And so there's magazines to read. And I just started building up knowledge about magic. And it wasn't even a sideline gig for me at this point. It was just mostly something that I was interested in because it could help me either at church, or maybe if I was doing a training class, it might be something I could do when we got back from lunch, just to re-engage attention. It was really just a tool for other things. And then someone at the club asked me to help them out on a corporate gig, like doing strolling, walking around magic at a cocktail reception. I was like, corporate? What magic for what? And I just always thought magic was either, you know, kid's birthday party or Las Vegas and television. And I really didn't know there was anything in between. And when I realized that, that was life-changing, because those were my people. I was good in that room. I'm good in a room like that. And magic just gives me an even higher level of effectiveness in meeting and engaging and introducing people and helping them network, and just sort of making the party or the event more of whatever it was supposed to be. And so that is where I realized that maybe this was something I could do, and it became a sideline gig. And then after economic changes, and I had left consulting, was working at Bank of America for a couple of years, and they wanted to move me to Charlotte, and we didn't go. I liked all the people that I worked with, but I did not like the job that I had, and I could not stomach the idea of leaving our neighborhood and our church and, you know, friends and all the stuff that we liked for the one thing in my life that I didn't like. Why should we chase that to, you know, Charlotte? So I said, well, I'll do magic on the side until something else, you know, presents itself. And I went on some other interviews, and nobody was hiring this was after the .com bust. And so the offers I was getting were going to be for include a pay cut. I was going to have to take a pay cut anyway. And I said, well, I'm taking a pay cut anyway. I'll for darn sure have fun. And so I started pursuing magic intentionally as a career in October of 2000.
I think back on when I was in college, and one of my favorite professors, and probably the class I did as well as any of them, was the guy could have been a stand-up comedian. He was just fantastic. And he kept the whole class entertained. And the whole time we're learning because he had our attention. And, and I look back, and like I said, you and I are about the same age. I can't remember my car keys are most days, but I can remember specific moments in my life when I was fully engaged in something, when my full attention, and as I do, when you speak, this is our biggest enemy because people are now looking at their phones so much and they're not paying attention. But you discovered early on that magic was a great way to get people's attention and to hold it and to teach people.
It has that value of being a pattern interrupt.
Yeah.
The value is it's a surprise.
Yeah.
You can overplay the card. You can overplay any of
literally
any
yeah.
tool. Right.
Yeah.
You can overdo it. And so if you're not specifically in a magic show entertainment environment, then I have to sort of, the way I do it when I'm speaking, it's not just entertainment straight through. There's a meaning behind what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But absolutely, it's an unfair advantage. It's, as we say, advantage play. It is a tool that used conscientiously and with care can help you get through the distraction or the lack of energy. I'm not afraid of being after lunch. A lot of speakers don't like to be after lunch because of the energy drop. And, a lot of times you end up in a breakout session at that point. Those, the breakout sessions can be lower energy. I do not have any fear of opening a conference or closing a conference or being the guy after lunch at a conference, because I know that I'm gonna engage attention at key moments during that hour. That is it's going to keep the energy up. It works with students too. It works with every. Yeah. So
it's so funny you mentioned that, because like yesterday I was down on the Gulf Coast speaking to a group, and it was so nice. Oh, it's just so nice to be in front of people, because we haven't really done that a lot in the last couple of years. So just to be in a room full of people and get to feel their energy and everything. But it's 9 o'clock in the morning, and of course you're always like, everybody's kind of pouring in after a lot. They had the big event the night before and everything else,
right.
But they were electric. They were amazing. And it was like, I finally got them laughing. I've now to switch gears real quick. I've just heard you say that what you do is not misdirection. It is actually direction. You're pointing somebody's attention into a good way. You're not trying to fool them or trick them per se. You're just kind of giving them a little bit of different reality, which is kind of a neat way of putting that.
Yeah, it's just I think that magic, the art of magic, the word or the concept of misdirection is very well known in the general public. And we tend to think of it as, look over here so you don't see what's happening over here.
That's what politicians like to do, right?
Right. And, right. and or just, so this whole idea of watch the birdie, and that means that you're not looking over here. But if you think about it, if you're being asked to look over here and somebody's doing something that's completely irrelevant and meaningless, then you know that you're being misdirected.
Yeah.
And so it's not effective. And so the misdirection, and this is something that's been discussed in magical literature by a Dutch magician who's no longer with us, but he sort of started to address this idea of intentionally and being conscious of where you direct attention, with the caveat that where you direct attention must have something relevant happening anyway. It's not just, oh, look, a pony, right? If there's a big explosion on one side of the stage, and there's streamers and fire, and then you look and there's an elephant. Nobody's going to be fooled. Everybody will know, well, we were so busy looking at this that the elephant appeared, and it demolishes the whole experience. But if what your attention is on is meaningful and important and part of the story that's being told, then the surprise things that may be happening behind the scenes are they still have impact at the end, because you don't feel like you were distracted. It's the difference between being directed and distracted.
Right.
And so all that theater training, all that directing and acting definitely affects my thinking on when I'm staging an illusion or anything. Is I need them to look over here, but the reason that I need them to look over here has to be legitimate. It can't just be that I wiggle my hand or something. There has to be a reason that it's important to look at this. And even later on, even knowing what happened, even if you were able to unwind and unpack what happened and say, well, it must have been at that moment, even knowing that, it was still important that you saw this. Yeah. It was still critical to experiencing it. So it just it changes the way you think about performing, and I think it changes the way you think about storytelling in general. Mm-hmm. If I were plotting a play or a novel or any kind of story, and I needed to integrate a surprise, it's just like, you don't want your foreshadowing to be clumsy. It has to be integrated into the story so that it's later on, it seems inevitable that would come to pass. And it was just not just the scene where, oh, why is this gun on the table? And then later on, the foreshadowing of things needs to be integrated into the story and not just dropped in so that it's there. That was not expressed eloquently, but I hope you got the idea.
No, I think you're doing pretty darn well. So, but I mean, you think about, let's look backwards real quick. You literally studied physics, and now you suspend physics, at least in the minds of your audience. And I just think that's wonderful. And I mean, and you look back at every little step that you did, it's kind of like it all makes sense now. I mean, here you are teaching change, corporate change. And oh yeah, you're on a cruise ship and out in the middle of the South China Sea in February of 2020, when this little mystery virus comes along, and suddenly you can't figure out how to get back to Atlanta at that point. And suddenly, your whole world as an entertainer literally gets blown up. And you everybody's no, we all did. Yeah. But it was like everybody had to figure out how to adapt. And I've heard you, and like I said, I want you to tell that story, because I think it's just absolutely amazing that that must have been terrifying in a way, to be out like on a boat and you couldn't get off the boat.
Well,
you were on a nice boat. Yeah,
it was a luxury situation.
You were in a nice boat. Okay, so.
Nobody was sick, and we had food and beverage and all that we could want. So I didn't really have a panic about that. I was very concerned about the timing of getting home, and whether I would have to go into some kind of quarantine, because the biggest job of my career was waiting for me the week after I got home. The single largest contract I ever did for any client ever, which, by the way, I was booked for that by the girl whose 8-year-old birthday party I did.
Get out. You are kidding me.
That's the other side of that coin, is that first birthday party I did in the late 90s. That girl grew up to hire me as a speaker for the single biggest contract I ever did. It was a multiple day event, emceeing, hosting a conference for a lot of people in a multinational corporation, and delivering my keynote as part of it. And so I was very motivated to get back and do that event. I wasn't ever scared on the ship. We were at sea for close to 2 weeks, not knowing where we were going to go. But I got home. What it really did was force me to realize that was coming.
Yeah.
And that was mid-February. And so in mid-March, when everything disappeared from my calendar in the course of a couple of days, I had the benefit of knowing that it was 99% certainly going to happen before. So I had a little bit of a head start on thinking about it. And I had never been on a Zoom meeting of any note, but I started thinking about Zoom as a theatrical tool, as a way to continue what I did. So I launched a Zoom show, a ticketed event where people would
I remember that. Yeah.
Pay to be on Zoom. And that's why I put this little studio together in my office, where it's continued. Other things have come of it. But that launched April 3rd and was positively reviewed in the New York Times twice by the end of May. And
how did it work out? How did it work out? Was it a financial, was it helpful? I mean, because I remember
absolutely, it was definitely helpful.
Yeah, good.
It helped me survive that summer. Between the gig that I did when I got back from the ship and the virtual work that was being generated from that ticketed show, was generating virtual corporate performances and team meetings and things like that. And even to this day, that whole lane of offerings in this virtual environment continues. I host webinars and teach webinars. I did one yesterday from right here. I do entertainment for corporate groups and distributed teams that have a meeting on Zoom, but I'll come in and do something. So this has continued to be worth the effort for having learned to do it.
Yeah, I really did. Like I said, I mentioned earlier that you don't consider it that you pivoted, because that would have put you in another direction. You're still actually working toward the same goals as a entertainer and as a magician and as a musician, but you added another tool in your toolbox, and it's been fun watching you get better. I mean, the sophistication of your quality of the output you're doing in the last 2 years has been fun to watch, Joe. I mean, it really has been. And
thank you.
And I don't think any of us have truly mastered this per se, but you're comfortable doing it, and it's been a fun thing to watch. And the other thing I guess I unpacked from what you just said was, when you did that 8-year-old birthday party, you probably gave it your all, and it paid off down the road. And you didn't realize that was literally going to be a God moment for you. You just said it was a gig, I'm going to go do it. But there's so much importance to, if you get invited to go do something and you show up, you do a great job, because it might just lead to opening a door down the road.
Well, that's the adage, is you're only as good as your last show.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that when I have a bad show, or show that I feel like I cannot wait to go do another one to get the taste out of my mouth, so that I can be positive. That definitely helped. That young woman, grew up, and we connected on LinkedIn, and she saw that, besides doing the children's parties that I had done at that time, she saw where my career had taken me, and just started looking at, when is going to be the right time to use that in when is that going to meet a specific need for me? And that's why be nice to your audience, and just things that seem like they would go without saying, but I've seen performers that are just difficult to work with and high maintenance, and maybe they don't need the spin-off work, but I love to know that I can track something that I'm doing today goes back to this Rotary Club, and that goes back to this Sunday school party, and that goes back. I love to see that people talk, and I want to give them something good to talk about.
Well, that is so true. And I love, I saw some advice you gave on one video where you're talking about, how magic and business line up, but even do everything as simple as make what your email you're sending back be a little bit special, a little bit different. And it's just the little things, that can like almost like compound interest. They all add up down the road and make a huge difference.
I couldn't agree more. I just had, before I talked to you today, a client for something that's coming up. I was on the phone with her, and that was the point. She was like, look, we have a whole team looking at the way we manage energy consumption in these franchised restaurants that we own. And if we can only save $100 in a year on energy for one of them, multiply that by, 3,000 locations.
That's real money.
Every little thing, when you multiply it by these volumes that we're dealing with, and it's the same for the big business, it's the same for an individual, solopreneur like me. It's like, if I'm going to speak to 150 people or 1,000 people, every one of them is I gotta give them something to take away that they would be willing to talk about positively, and it comes back. It always comes back.
As we're wrapping up, and I hate that we got to wrap up because I could literally talk to you all day. We've gone through a couple of years that, with the pandemic, and now with what's going on in Europe with Ukraine and the threat of nuclear war, which you and I grew up with now, but there's a whole new generation that's having to kind of live with that. Obviously, you got to go live your life. What advice would you give to people that have a dream, but they think life may be too challenging or anything else? Because you have literally not only survived, but thrived through some really tough times in the last couple of years. What advice would you give them?
Well, I will qualify this by saying I can't take credit for all of that. I've been fortunate to have supportive family and friends. Yeah. So I guess from an advice standpoint, it would be careful who you surround yourself with.
True.
Because that can make or break you in a crisis. So I've been blessed in that way. I'm a Christian. I have had crises of faith throughout my life, but the time that I invest in trying to understand what God's trying to do in my life is always beneficial. And when I discount it, I pay a price for that. Yeah. So I would just, without proselytizing, I would just say he built the place.
Yeah.
So I would advise people to look for that kind of guidance in their lives. Yeah. Divine providence. And don't hide your talent. Just don't ignore the stuff that you were good at when you were a kid. If you were in band, or if you were playing soccer or whatever, and now you sell insurance or office supplies or I don't know, whatever it is that you do, let the stuff that brought you joy and that you were good at influence the way that you do what you do. And that's what I've done. And it has, everything I've ever done, I didn't know that it was going to whirlwind itself into this sort of thing, but now I have opportunities to perform and entertain and see people and meet people, and sometimes talk about business and experiences that way. Sometimes just be an entertainer. I've got a show coming up. I do want to get in a quick plug. Kosciuszko, May 6th. May the 6th, I'll be in Mississippi at the Skipworth Performing Arts Center doing an evening of piano, vocal, and magic. And, wonderful. Tickets are on sale now. It's the Kosciuszko Foundation for Excellence in Education, KFEE. Nice. So if you just Google that, you'll find it.
Okay. How else can folks find you?
TurnerMagic.com is my website. Look me up on Twitter and Instagram at TurnerMagic. Google me, you'll find me. Joe Turner. Thank you.
Joe, this has been wonderful today. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, and thanks for sharing your positivity and your magic. It's just like us, wonderful.
I'll be honest, it was neat to go through a whole interview and not do a trick. So you just got all heart this time.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And like I said, I'll put a few links in the description below so that folks can see some of your magic and hear some of your music too, because you're just amazing. And I just have really loved this time.
Thank you, Marshall. See y'all in Kosciuszko.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching this episode of Mississippi Stories. Make sure to subscribe to the Mississippi Today YouTube channel and click the bell to be notified every time a new video uploads.